Hi there everyone, welcome to this video looking at percentages and particularly the topic of reverse percentages, which I know can be a particularly challenging one in the GCSE exam, not just in terms of how we do it, but more importantly how you spot it's one of those types of questions in the exam. Now, I'm going to talk you through two methods on how to answer this question. One would be more geared towards a non-calculator paper or a mental method for doing it, and then one would be for doing it a lot more quickly and efficiently if it was on a calculator paper. Before we get there, I think it's worth reminding ourselves, I've written a quick question here, on how we can approach a normal percentage question, because the reverse percentage question is going to be based on the premise of doing the opposite to what we do here. So I've just written out quickly, a £60 coat is reduced by 20%. So method one would be how we can solve this mentally, and that would be find 10%. Now, how do we find 10%? Well, we divide by 10. So we're going to take £60 and we're going to divide it by 10. Now, the most important thing here is to understand why we divide by 10 to find 10%. And the reason we do that is not because it's 10%, but it's because there are 10 10% in 100%. So for example, if I wanted to find 20%, and I know that's what I'm trying to do here, but I'm going to do it in two steps instead. To find 20%, I'd divide by 5, because there are 5 20% in 100%. So it's really important that you understand how many 10% make up your total amount. Because we've got 100% of the coat, because we've got the full amount and the full cost of the coat, 10 10% make up the cost of the coat. So we're going to divide by 10. So £60 divided by 10 is £6. So 10% is £6. Then we can find 20%, and we do that by comparing our 10%. So to get from 10% to 20%, we double that, we multiply by 2. So let's multiply the £6 by 2 as well. So that's going to be £12. Finally, we then understand that this £12 represents the 20% reduction, so we're going to do the £60 cost of our coat, subtract the £12 reduction, so the sale price of the coat would be £48. Method number two would be doing this on a calculator, and that's to understand turning percentages into decimals. So I start with 100%, which represents the full cost of the coat if it hadn't been reduced in the sale. I take away 20% because that's what it's been reduced by, and I'm left with 80%. Now we turn 80% into a decimal. Now if you remember that 100%, a whole one, is represented by a whole one, then we need to think logically about how we'd represent 80%, and that would be 0.80 or just 0.8. Then all you need to remember is it's the cost of the coat, or whatever item it might be in the question in the exam, multiplied by the new decimal value, and that will give you your £48. So we've got two methods there for basic percentages when we're moving forward from the original amount into the new price. Those methods are important to understand because they're going to help us now tackle these reverse percentage questions which I have here for you. So the question says, in a sale, the normal price of a book is reduced by 10%. The sale price is £4.86. Calculate the normal price. So the biggest challenge for you, I would imagine, is going to be, how do I spot that this is a reverse percentage question? The way I like to do this is I like to set out myself a little diagram, and I like to think about the information I've got and what I'm after. In any percentage question, there's always three pieces of information. There's the original amount, there's the percentage that it's changing by, and there's the new amount. And you're going to get given two of those pieces of information in the exam, and you're going to be asked to find the third one. So let's have a look at what information we've got in this question. In a sale, the normal price of a book is reduced by 10%. So we have the percentage reduction, we have that piece of information. It then says the sale price is £4.86. So we have the new information. Now it's quite easy to visualise that this is a reverse percentage question because we're going back to the original amount. So, thinking back to what we did at the start of this video, let's have a look at the two methods. So, method one, and this is how to do it if it was a non-calculator question. Let's start with the idea of 100%, and let's ask ourselves, if it's been reduced by 10%, so 100% reduced by 10%, as a percentage, what have we paid for that book? Well, we would have paid 100% of the cost if we'd bought it at normal price. We didn't buy it at normal price because it's been reduced by 10%. So we've paid 90% of the cost of the book. And 90% is represented by the £4.86. Now we're going to do the method where we start by finding 10%. So we're going to find 10%. Now last time we found 10% by dividing by 10, and I made a point of telling you that we do that because there are 10 10% in 100%, which is what we had. We had the full amount of the code. Here we've got 90% of the book. So to find 10%, we need to ask ourselves, how many 10% are in 90%? Well, there's 9. So we're going to do £4.86 divided by 9 to help us get 10%, and that's going to give us 54 pence. So we now have a figure for 10%, and we can use this figure to get back to 100%, or the cost of the book originally. Two ways to do this. We could take our 10% and we could add it on to our 90%, and that would give us 100%. Or we can do 10 lots of our 10%, which would give us our 100%. So we're going to do 54p, which is 10%, times by 10 to give us 100%, and that's going to tell us that the cost of the book originally was £5.40, and there's the final answer. Method number 2, if you think back to the earlier part of the video, is how to do this using decimals if this turned up on a calculator paper. So we start with the idea of 100%. We take away 10% because that's what it's been reduced by in this sale, and that gives us 90%. 90% we then turn into a decimal, which is 0.9. And then if you remember last time, we started with the cost, and in this example it's £4.86, and we multiplied by this decimal to move forward to the sale price. So think logically, if you're going to go backwards, in maths we do the inverse, so we're going to divide by 0.9, and you'll find that that also gives us £5.40, which is the normal price of the book. Let's use those two methods on a second question just to practice them, because this is a really important topic for the GCSE. It's very likely to come up, and it's easy for students to get confused with this one. So, in a sale, normal prices are reduced by 15%. Janice buys a computer in the sale, she pays £578. So, method number 1, we start with the idea that Janice had paid full price, 100%. We don't know what that is. That's what we're trying to find out. It was reduced by 15%, so we now know that Janice has paid 85% of the cost of the computer, and 85% turned out to be £578. So now we follow our method through. So we're going to start by finding 10%. And how are we going to find 10% this time? Well, we're going to have to do, and I suppose this is going to be quite a fiddly calculation, how many 10% are in 85%? Well, there's 8.5 of them, so we're going to do 578 divided by 8.5, and that's going to give us £68. And once we've got our 10%, we can work back to what our 100% must have been, timesing that by 10. So that's going to give us our £680 for the cost of the computer before the sale. Method number 2, start with 100%, take away the discounted price, which is 15% this time, means that we've paid 85% of the cost. 85% as a decimal is 0.85, and then we take the price in the question, 578, and we divide by this decimal, which gives us the £680. Hope you found that useful. Two methods there. Either is going to be absolutely fine in the exam. I just suppose which one you prefer using and which paper it's more appropriate to do it on. Thanks for watching.